Yo guys, welcome back to another video. This is going to be the 8.5 predictive tier list for the West. Just because it is slightly different from the East, because you guys have had Law and NES Lobby banned the whole time throughout OP8. I know a ton of people have been really bored and tired of the OP8 meta, so I'm sure, like me, you're probably really excited to see what happens when the starter decks come out and how that's going to shake things up. I have some thoughts and opinions on everything, but please just keep in mind, like I said, these are all just my thoughts and opinions, and take everything with a grain of salt. This is just for fun, just to kind of see where things shake up so that we can look at it later, see what we got right, see what we got wrong, and yeah, just have some fun making a little tier list. It's that time of the season, baby. We gotta get those tier lists out, you know? So yeah, let's have some fun. Let's make a tier list and let's jump in and let's get started. All right, let's get things started. I thought it would be fun to start with the leaders who are getting the new starter decks. So we can just kind of go in order here. Dofi, I'm just going to go ahead and do this. I do think with Red Purple Law gone and NES Lobby banned, I think Dofi is just tier 1. Just because, as you can see in OP9, it's pretty clear now that he is definitely the best deck in format. And while there are some other like outside influences that are affecting the meta in OP9 that aren't present in 8.5, I still think he's just strong enough just to be tier 1 best deck in format. So this will be the standard that we base everything off of. I'm going to keep him up there by himself for now. We'll see what we want to do when we get down here towards the second row. But moving on, Whitebeard, I just don't think enough of the card. Like 7 cost Newgate is actually not very good in Whitebeard. 5 cost Rush Ace, I guess kind of is. I tried him out whenever the starter decks came out. I'm not the biggest Whitebeard player. I'm a Red Ace stan. But yeah, he just wasn't really cutting it for me. And I honestly wouldn't really include him in this list, but I just wanted to for the leaders. So I'm probably just going to put him down gently in Spice Copium. Katakuri is a weird one, because if you run like the full Egghead and Trigger versions, you can kind of beat Doflamingo, but you need a little bit of luck. I think you still lose to like Lucci and a lot of other decks. But you know, he's kind of decent. I don't think that the starter decks really gave him any crazy buffs. Like 5 cost Katakuri is decent. 6 cost Mom just doesn't really seem worth it, unfortunately. So we'll just put him in tier 3 for now. And just to quickly go over everything, tier 1, I'm just going to say is like either best deck in format or something that you would absolutely expect to be like topping a regional. Tier 1.5 is probably like top, I don't know, 64 at a regional. Something that you wouldn't be shocked, but you wouldn't like maybe put too much money on it being like the top 8 or something. Tier 2 I think is like competitive, but you're not going to expect to see topping anything. Maybe something that you see win a few like store treasure cups or store regionals or something like that. And then tier 3 we're just gonna say is like viable yet not very competitive, where like you could see him peaking in at topping a regional or something, but it's something you're probably just going to see like at locals. And then our Spice Copium is going to be like, you know, just either you need the right pilot running it or the spice hasn't been found yet, that kind of thing. So moving on, we got Purple Luffy, and while I do think Luffy gets some nice buffs from the starter decks, I think he's just lacking too many of the key cards that come out in OP09, like Searcher Law, Rush Sanji, obviously Gum Gum Giant is probably the biggest one. There's just quite a few cards. I think there's 1 or 2 others that I'm even forgetting right now. You get consistency from the new cards that are coming out in the star decks, but you actually really need the added consistency that come from things like Searcher Law combined with stuff like Zorojuro, and like just being able to search out everything that you need. Like if a lot of times if you don't go first, or if you just don't have that Luffy Taro, the deck can crumble in on itself like crazy, which is kind of unfortunate and a bit of a crutch, obviously. But Luffy, when he high rolls and like has everything he needs, is kind of insane. Even in 8.5, I think it's very strong. But just because he's lacking that little bit of consistency, I mean, I'm sure if some people make him work, he could probably go up to here. Green Uta, similar to Whitebeard, I'm kind of just adding, you know what? I think Uta is actually good enough that I'll put her in tier 3. Just because 9 cost Shanks is a really good card and it's searchable in Uta. And you can still run things like 8 cost Kid, but I think you're just gonna have a hard time against Black. Even Smoker and Lucci might be a little bit hard. But yeah, she just has really strong consistency, and you have like new blockers that you can run in the build too, which just gives it a little bit more of a buff. But for now, I think I would just keep her at tier 3. Smoker's a weird one. Smoker's a deck that I feel like everyone rates it very highly, but never performs that well, you know? Like, at least in the past, I don't know, 5 sets. But, like, even with the buffs, like Tashigi's really good. I love that new Hina card too. I think I'm gonna have to put him in tier 3 just because this is one where I could be wrong. I could be really wrong about Smoker, just because we didn't really. I don't think he can beat Red Purple Law. I don't think he can do okay against Dofi, but I didn't get to see him really do much in 8.5 over here in the east, so this is one I could be wrong about. But I think he just loses to Lucci. It's kind of like the Moria problem, but I do think I have high expectations to see where people kind of take him and run with him. He might even go up to tier 2. Well, let's see what happens. Red Ace, I think, is still really strong into a lot of leaders, but here has the problem, right? Blue Dofi kind of just destroys Ace. Even if you try, you can try so hard. You can run Fire Fist at 4, you can run Jet Pistol at 4, you can run all these things. At the end of the day, it's just like, even if you're KOing your opponent's board, if you're not building your own board and being able to retaliate and get your own, like, gain resources from those things, you're just gonna lose to Dofi at the end of the day. And Red Ace still has a pretty rough matchup against Black Yellow Luffy, which I'm expecting to be pretty present in the meta still. But the good thing is Ace does have a decent matchup into Black, like beats Lucci, in my opinion, slightly favored against Lucci, just because stuff like Flame Emperor KOs Jack. Lucci runs quite a bit of counterless, possibly even more counterless going into 8.5 with stuff like Soap Sheep and 2-cost Uta. So, you know, having a good matchup into like one of the top tier decks, and also like for whatever reason just the most played deck in a lot of places like America, so like is a good thing going for him for Ace. That's all I'm trying to say. So probably like tier 3. I love Ace, he's just one of my favorites, so there's a little bit of bias there. Starter 14 Luffy, this one's kind of hard. I think you're just gonna see Luffy can't handle Dofi, in my opinion. He's just not good at clearing multiple bodies per turn. But he does have the plus 1k leader effect is actually really strong against Dofi. The only problem is it's kind of like the second half of the game where you can kind of try and consistently have that going for you, and by then it might be too late against Dofi. Like, if Dofi even just mid to high rolls you as starter deck 14 Luffy, I think you just lose most of the time. But I haven't seen enough of that matchup to really know. Like if people figure it out and they play like 8-cost Sabo and can handle Dofi like considerably well, I could see this jumping up to tier 1.5, just because for whatever reason people just make this deck work in the West, and especially in Europe. And like, I don't think he's that great, I really don't, I'm sorry, but I do respect his strength. And like, you know, you're a black deck that can run Moria, so obviously you're gonna be pretty strong. Yeah, for now I'm just gonna keep him in tier 2. Like, honestly, he could even drop off to tier 3, but I'll throw him a bone for now. Let's go next. We got Marco. So Marco gets quite a bit stronger with the new 7-cost Newgate, in my opinion. Marco can kind of do what Ace can't against Dofi, which I think gives him a shot, just because you can run stuff like Gravity Blade and 7-cost Newgate, where you have the body on the board. It works so perfectly with leader effect. 7-cost Newgate doesn't do too much in Red Ace or Whitebeard, but he's extremely powerful in Marco. Like, just being able to KO a 7k or less body with leader effect and Newgate is just really strong. And since Newgate is an 8k body on the board, it's hard for stuff like Doflamingo to get rid of him. So, you know, if you just see what you need to see, the only problem is 4-life leader, so that is a little hard for him to go against something like Dofi. And I think he can still struggle against Black if they're just clearing bodies. But I don't know, I think like people will be cooking with Marco. He could be a good tier 2 leader. Nothing crazy, I don't think, but we'll just see what happens. Nami, man, this is hard, because Nami just seems to do better. Well, Nami seems to do better in the West, but that's also because Law got banned early. Let's be real. I think we would have seen a lot more tops in the East too if Law was banned from OP8 for us. Like, honestly, the Dofi matchup is rough. It's pretty rough for Nami, I'm not gonna lie. Ploofy, I think, is pretty hard for Nami as well. Yeah, I think she just has, I would put her up here, but I think she just has too many just rougher matchups coming out of this newer meta. And obviously if the best deck in format beats you, then it's hard for you to be anywhere higher than like something like tier 2, unless it's a special situation where it's just like everything else is is like winnable for you. So I think for now I'm just gonna put Nami here in tier 2. I think that's pretty good. Reiju, this is a tricky one. This is a problem of like Dofi is just kind of doing what you're doing, but just doing it better. I don't know. I can't really see Reiju climbing up that high in this 8.5 meta. Like, we haven't really seen her do anything in OP9 either. If you're a Reiju fan, I'm sorry. I think I'm gonna have to just keep her down here in tier 3. Hancock, man, this is a tough one as well. I think Hancock's gonna have to go tier 3 for me as well, just because obviously Lucci destroys you like 90% of the time. I do think Hancock has like a decent matchup into Dofi, just if you're able to remove his units and kind of like stabilize yourself, especially with stuff like 6-cost Jozu and then just like a Grav Blade and 6-cost Hancock. There are ways to kind of like outmaneuver Dofi and beat him. I don't think it's really favored at the end of the day, but a good Hancock player I think can be a decent Dofi as long as they're not high rolling too hard. And then yeah, you have some other decent matchups like Black Yellow Luffy, or you destroy Bonnie. You beat the Pluffy. It might be okay for Bonnie just because they don't have some of the OP8.5 cards. Or sorry, for Hancock, I think I said Bonnie there on accident. I think there's enough matchups that she's decent into, but there are too many matchups where it's kind of iffy. And obviously, like, getting to this guy next, I think Lucci being so high up in the tier list is going to keep Hancock down. So let's move on to Lucci. I'm going to put him here at tier 1.5. I don't know, man. Like, I don't think I can put him at tier 1. I just don't really think I can. Just because I think people are going to realize that, at least this is at the very start of 8.5, I think Dofi is just going to dominate. I think it's just going to happen just like kind of natural, like what happens most of the time. Anytime like a best deck in format gets kind of like statued in. But the thing is like, he does have a decent matchup into Dofi. This is the thing. I say this a lot about Lucci. If he teched only for blue Dofi and just like 100% everything was geared to beat blue Dofi, he could probably get it close to like 50-50, right? But then he struggles into other matchups. And this is the same problem he has in OP9. But the thing is in OP9, there's other leaders that he has to worry about. Like just making sure that he can beat stuff like even his like slightly favored matchups, right? Of like Bonnie, Shanks, Red Purple Luffy. He needs to make sure that he can still beat all those leaders that he's supposed to beat, and also beat the best deck in format, which really spreads him thin. And all of Lucci's tech cards essentially come in the form of counterless cards, so there's only there's a limited amount of space that he can run those tech cards and like what he can actually run, right? So in 8.5, you're probably going to see a lot of people running Soap Sheep and the 2-cost Uta along with Jack and Moria, and that's already a ton of counterless. And they're probably going to have to run Kaku, the 5-cost Kaku, to get the early KOs off of Dofi to make sure he just doesn't run away with the game. I know Kaku's a counterless card, but a counter, the 5-cost Kaku, but it's like a card that not everybody tends to run, because then it's harder for you to run things like Borsalino. It's harder for you to run things like 5-cost Sabo. It's harder for you to run the other like defensive counter cards that you would like to run, or things that might help you out in the mirror or something like that, and still tech for all of the top leaders, right? And not only that, now you have to try and beat blue Dofi, but you still have to try and beat your worst matchup, which is Black Yellow Luffy. So just because of that, I can't put him in tier 1. I think he's I mean, maybe the West will prove me wrong on this one, but I think he's just gonna be like top 3, 4 leaders for the set. Let's move on to Bonnie. I think Bonnie, this is what I'm actually the most interested to see what happens, because Bonnie kind of got kept out of the top 3, top 4 spots in the East because of Red Purple Law. It was a Lucci problem where it's like you either tech to beat Lucci or you tech to beat Red Purple Law. It's hard to do both, right? And it caused a lack of consistency with you being able to top or win or go 7 or 8 rounds winning with Bonnie. Now that Red Purple Law is out of the equation, Essentially, you just kind of have to be like, okay, can I beat or stand up to Lucci, and can I beat Dofi, right? Because you already have a favored matchup into Black Yellow Luffy, kind of no matter what build you're running. And as long as you know the matchup well enough, like you don't need 9 cost Zoro to beat Black Yellow Luffy. As long as you have some other key cards like Carrot, Doflamingo, or even 8 cost Kid, you can beat Black Yellow Luffy. So here's the conundrum, and here's the problem that I'm personally trying to help other Bonnie players in the West figure out. With some testing myself and from my experience from OP9 is, do you run 8 cost Kid just so that you can have the favored matchup into Dofi, or do you try and run like a different hybrid build that can stand up to Lucci but also has a decent enough matchup into Blue Dofi? And it's all going to come down to like how much you're seeing of each of these in the actual meta itself. Where if you're seeing Lucci drop off just because so many people are running Blue Dofi, you just run the 8 cost Kid build. You have a great matchup into Dofi, and then you just, you know, keep running things like 6 cost Hawkins and 10 cost Dofi to try and deal with the Luccis that you see. Hope they don't high roll you, and just try your best, right? Because if you run a like defensive mid aggro 8 cost Kid build, you are favored against Dofi. Even if they're running things like Red Rock, you're still favored. You just have to learn how to play around it. Obviously, sometimes there's nothing you can do. Like if they Red Rock you, you don't have another kid, or you just don't have the resources to come back. Like you will lose. But I can just attest from the OP8.5, like Bonnie is definitely favored into Dofi with most of the builds. Even builds that don't run 8 cost Kid, I think it's at least like a 50-50 matchup, which puts her in a really good spot. I think you just have to learn how to play the matchup, learn what each build does and like the strengths and weaknesses and how to play off of that. I have an 8.5 testing video that I did with the homies from the Discord, Rowan, a really good Australian player. So if you want to see some testing with a kind of unconventional Bonnie build that I was testing out, you can check out that video. I will have more videos for 8.5 Bonnie coming up as well, and going into OP8.5. So keep an eye out for those. If you're a Bonnie stan, if you're a green stan like I am, rise up. I think she's still really, really strong in 8.5 and 09 for that matter. So don't despair. Don't think that like you have to just play Lucci. I don't think you do. And in fact, for Bonnie players, like Blue Dofi coming up to the top here is actually really good for us, because now there's 2 decks that are at the top that can beat Lucci, and that just means that like no matter what, the amount of people playing Lucci should go down at least a little bit, right? I mean, I could be wrong, at least in America, but we'll see. But I don't want to spend too much time talking about Bonnie there. Let's move on. Black Yellow Luffy, I think is just going to go here. I think this is how I would have it right here. I think Lucci has a little bit better matchup into Dofi. Black Yellow Luffy beats Lucci. Bonnie beats Black Yellow Luffy but struggles into Lucci. It's like a weird square. We got a weird, instead of a triangle like it was before, we have a weird square pyramid kind of thing. You could rearrange these however you want. I just think, I think it'll go like this. I think just because there's so many good Lucci players in the West and just more people are playing him, I'm going to put him a little bit higher. Even though I still think Black Yellow Luffy beats Lucci, I think Lucci has a slightly better matchup into Doflamingo. If people are running, because I'm expecting people to play more events in the start of the 8.5 Dofi build, so more people running Grav Blade, Red Rock. You probably have to run at least 1 Perfume Premier, so like I'm expecting people to play those, which is, and Pudding, right? Pudding is the real BYL killer if you, especially if they don't know the matchup, but Grab Blade hurts a lot too. Dofi just has too many answers, potential answers to Black Yellow Luffy, that I don't think I could call the matchup favored for Black Yellow Luffy anymore. I do think BYL had a decent matchup against Dofi all the way up until now, just to where like, if you could play around his events and stuff and they didn't high roll you with Jinbeis, you're probably going to be fine as long as you get your 9k leaders going. But now there's an added element where like not only can they control your board and they have the same events and everything, they can also just like rush you down and out resource you by pressuring you with their own units. So I do think it's like at the best 50-50, at the least probably slightly favored for Dofi. But I would still say a really good BYL player that knows the matchup and knows how to play around all of your potential answers to their threats is still going to be able to beat Dofi. Like really, it's like almost like 1 and then a tie for 2 and then Bonnie's chilling at 3rd. And that could change, like if there's a ton of people playing Dofi and you just throw in some 8-cost kids, bro, and then boom, Bonnie's up here. But we'll just leave it here for now. Moving on, Red Purple Luffy, I think This is tier 3 is also kind of like just the OP9 waiting room, right? We'll put red purple Luffy here. I do think there's potential that you can use some of the stuff from the purple starter decks that came out, and maybe like, because he has a decent enough matchup into Dofi, just being a 6k leader and ramping and getting the buffs from like 9 cost Whitebeard and stuff like that, that might give him enough of a good matchup into something like Dofi to put him at tier 3. I do think he still just loses to Lucci and a lot of other decks. Bonnie is like red purple Luffy's like worst nightmare, so not a good standing right now, but I'm at least gonna throw him a bone and put him in tier 3. Moria, same kind of thing. Some of these I won't spend too much time on, I promise. You go into tier 3 for me, buddy. Yeah, not enough support, not enough power there. Vegapunk, my guy, my G, my Lord and Savior Vegapunk. I'm gonna put him probably higher than most people would expect. I have to. I'm sorry. Like, he's just such a good leader. Honestly, we could put him here. Yeah. So here's the thing. Out in 8.5, there's really only like a few leaders that you can just like clearly say have favored matchups against Dofi. One of them, in my opinion, is 8 cost kid variants of Bonnie, and the other one is just Vegapunk. Vegapunk beats Blue Dofi in 8.5 and OP9 for that matter. You might have seen the really awesome, talented Japanese player Ka run it back. Sorry, I forgot which CSs they were, but I think one of was the Miyagi CS. He got like top 4 and then top 16 at the Wave 1 finals with Vegapunk, with Red Purple Law and NES Lobby still around, which is insane. This dude is cracked. He's the Giga Chad of Giga Chads. He was also the OG crazy Rebecca player that won the CS back in the day. Vegapunk has a great matchup into Dofi. 50-50 against Lucci. Slightly favored for Vegapunk if you ask me. You just have to really know the matchup. The only problem is this goes to time a lot, so it's kind of annoying there. Pretty 50-50 for Black Yellow Luffy. I think slightly unfavored for Bonnie if they see multiple Hawkins and you just don't have ways to answer it. Purple Luffy can be a little bit tough. Star Deck Luffy I think is fine. Marco, I'm not really sure too much about that matchup. Marco might even be slightly favored for that. I'm not sure, just because they have some rush. And then about, you know, Nami's a little hard, 50-50 or a little bit slightly unfavored for Vegapunk. When literally like 90% of your matchups are 80, 90, or like 50-50 or higher, and then you're favored into the best deck in format. I'm sorry, that literally, like, just on paper, I would put, I say this every time, on paper, I would put Vegapunk here, like higher than I have him. But it's a really hard deck to pilot. A lot of these games are going to go to time. It's a very like intensive deck to play, and you're going to get tired from it, and the slightest misplay can cause you the game. So it's a really hard deck to play, really awesome deck to play, but just because of the practicality of it, I have to put it a little bit lower. But just again, like if this were just on paper, this is where I would have him, or just on paper he's up here. I'm gonna put him here. All right, let's move on. Enel, I do think you're gonna see Enel kind of come up a little bit, just because Enel has a good matchup into Dofi, especially the ones that run all the Egghead Luffy, Egghead Nami. It's similar, like Enel could beat Red Purple Law in 8.5, so it doesn't change much, where he's good at handling these kind of like swarm decks just by waiting out the storm, KOing everything as it comes, and then just dominating late game, because Dofi cannot deal with multiple Yamatos or Aces on the board. Even if you run Red Rock, sure, you Red Rock my 9 cost Yamato, I just play another one, KO another one of your bodies, and unless you have like 3 more Red Rocks in hand, like I'm gonna just out survive you. The only problem is you have an unfavored matchup in Lucci, unfavored in Bonnie, closer to 50-50. Once Bonnie drops Zoro or is running 8 cost Kid, it does become more winnable for Enel, but as long as you have like Hawkins and Doflamingo, you're still gonna win. And then probably like about a 50-50 I think for Black Yellow Luffy, as long as the Enel player properly knows the matchup. So decent, right? I think it's decent. I think you're actually, as for people who have been really glad not to see Anel running around as much, I think you're going to see him come up a little bit more, just because he does have a decent matchup into Doflamingo. It is you have to know the matchup, and it's kind of like Vegapunk, where like it can seem very daunting and you're just like, I'm just gonna get rushed down, I'm gonna lose. It's like, don't worry, you can control it, you can handle it. Vegapunk can even handle like a pretty high rolling Doflamingo, which is kind of insane. You can get rushed down and you will just lose against Doflamingo sometimes as an L. That's just how it happens. But for the most part, I think he has a slightly favored matchup into Doflamingo, as long as the N player is good and knows the matchup. All right, Zoro, I think you're just going to go to tier 3. I think you just can't handle... Dofi just does it better, right? It's kind of like Reiju. I think, yeah, I can't give him any higher than tier 3. I know this leader isn't coming out yet. This is the PRB leader, but since it's about to come out in the West, and you guys won't be able to use it in tournaments for a while, which is kind of unfortunate. But I did want to just throw him on there, just throw him up there, just in case. I'm gonna put him in just tier 3. Like, the rush is good. I don't know how he really goes into this meta, so I'm kind of just like throwing a, not even throwing a bone. I'm just guessing here. I think he goes there. Perona, I think, can struggle. Obviously, struggles against Lucci quite a bit, and can kind of like, I think Perona can take on Dofi if you build the deck the right way, but I do think it is difficult if you're gonna, it's the problem, it's that same Lucci Bonnie problem, right? Whereas like if you tech for one deck, you're losing out on all the other ones, and I think she kind of has that problem. I'd love to see people kind of keep trying to cook with her, because I do think there are some ways that you can kind of like try and tackle Doflamingo, but yeah, like maybe at the end of tier 2, but I think I'm gonna keep her at tier 3 for now. Betty, I think your OP8.5 waiting list. Sorry, we're just taking you out. Yamato, my favorite leader. Yamato's here, guys. This is the thing, Sky, if like we're talking just Sky aggro or just like normal Wano builds, like you might have been seeing top recently in the West, just get obliterated by Doflamingo. Like even Japan's best Yamatos that were running Sky aggro or just aggro trigger variants have all been struggling in OP8.5. A lot of really good players, Yamato players that are better than me, have all been struggling. No one's been able to crack like a really amazing aggro list that does well into this the OP8.5 meta. But I do think in 8.5 there is a shot for just like a regular fortress build that runs ACOS Kid, and I will be cooking, so don't worry. I already have run a list in OP9 that I went 4-0 at locals. That was a fortress list that did pretty well, and I do think you can beat Dofi, but it's you just got to make sure you can beat everything else. And when you take out some of the triggers in Rush, it makes Black harder. Though BYL is probably still fine, but yeah, Bonnie is also kind of difficult if you're not running stuff like Zoro. But I do think there's going to be like a Samurai or a Fortress build that can work in 8.5. So don't worry, I'm out here cooking. Let me know if you have some builds that you've been trying. But I will just let you know from firsthand experience that I don't think the aggro builds are going to be very good in 8.5 unless you're just resigned to saying like, I can beat Lucci, I can beat BYL if I see them. I'm gonna lose to Dofi and Bonnie if I see them in a tournament. If that's what you're willing to go for, that's fine. But honestly, just in my personal opinion, the aggro builds are not going to be as good for 8.5 and OP9 for that matter, unfortunately. So I will just put Yamato in tier 3 for now. It breaks my heart, but I got to keep it pretty realistic, right? Like I let bias affect me pretty heavily sometimes, but I can't. Like if you do a fortress build that actually works really well against enough things, I think Yamato could come up to tier 2. But until that kind of gets solidified, I'm just going to keep her in tier 3 here. All right, Blue Yellow Ace, I think, has just some sauce, some spice. He's kind of here. Like, these could probably just not be here. Kalgara, I think, is still decent. I'm going to put him here with Zoro. Just, like, kind of decent, but still, unfortunately, it's just like Dofi does it better, right? Pudding, I think, just can't keep up when the best deck in format is kind of like aggro or like aggro control, kind of like that. I think Pudding just has a really hard time, so I'm gonna put her down here, put her right next to Sanji. Oh, look at that, that's so nice. All right, Red Green Law, There's the dude in Europe who just like keeps topping with him because he dodges Lucci's, but like outside of that, I don't think I can put him any higher. Like I'll throw him a bone and just put him in tier 3 because of that alone. Just that one Giga Chad dude, sorry I forgot his name, who's running around just slaying everyone except for Lucci's with red green law. But he's gonna go there for me. And then Rebecca, I'll put in the Spice Copium at the top. Nice. Still a good leader, but I think just because of how hard some of your matchups are up at the top, I think it's going to be hard for you. And this might also just be OP10 waiting room, right? Rebecca might have her time to shine again in OP10, but we'll find out. All right, guys, that's going to be it. I'm sorry that went on for a little bit longer than I was wanting it to, but this is my predictive tier list for AP 8.5 in the West. I actually had a lot more to say about it than I thought I was going to. I do think there are some real nice intricacies that you're gonna see here in the top like 1 to 2 tiers, with some fun rogue decks coming out of tier 3 that just with the right build, with the right pilot, could kind of like jump up, top a regional, or win a store treasure cup or something like that. But let me know what you think. Let me know if you think that Lucci should be tier 1, or if BYL is still like best deck in format, or if I got any other green Bonnie stands out here who think they've cracked the code already. And let me know. Keep an eye out, because for 8.5 I will be doing a few videos for Bonnie and Yamato, and hopefully some other ones. I'll try and do maybe like a Floofy or like some other stuff like that. And yeah, that's it. So let me know what you think. Let me know what you're excited to play in 8.5. And just as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.